how to deal with a person who quite deliberately and in a very, I would say, systematic and planned manner has a vision of his country, in this case the Russian Federation, and its place in the world and the world order that seems to be more and more sort of spreading apart from the concepts that were accepted by everybody after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the creation of the Russian Federation, when, in fact, President Yeltsin signed treaties with the neighbors of Russia at the time, renouncing forever and ever to any claims on their territory. Russia, as a country, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, has signed any number of treaties of that sort. When, under my presidency, we offered President Yeltsin the 3-star order, our highest decoration, for recognizing the wise decision he took in accepting that the Soviet Union as a formation was obsolete, unfair, unjust, totalitarian, and that we should all be happy to kiss it goodbye. President Putin, who was by then in power and chosen by Mr. Yeltsin at some point, refused him permission to come and pick up that decoration. And Mr. Yeltsin only came 5 years later and gave us a wonderful speech, as he did accept. That was not that long before his death. He did accept the decoration from Latvia and made a beautiful speech saying how, of course, the Soviet system had been unfair and had caused suffering to all the peoples that it oppressed, that Bolshevism as a turn for the Russian Revolution, which started as an anti-totalitarian movement, widely supported across many lands, had done all these lands a great deal of harm. That it would be helpful to have a new order. He made a very beautiful speech. I think we should publish it and somehow spread it far and wide. And truly, the attitude then was on the part of the Western powers, whom we, as former occupied countries, had been annexed by the Soviet Union. We had to lobby for us being allowed to return to the Western community with the idea that this should make Russia angry, whoever Russia is. You see, all it takes, the way Mr. Putin has framed his doctrine now, all it takes is to have some provocateur go out in the street and get a march, which need not be as impressive as those we had in Greece or Spain against austerity, or in France against anything whatever. When you have these huge marches of the population, it will not take much. With the attitude that President Putin has adopted, to say, oh, our people are being oppressed there, we have to march in. With that attitude, they could march on Brighton Beach, you see, come in with their submarines or with their cruisers that they're buying from France. By the way, extraordinary thing to do for a NATO country, to sell aggressive sort of war equipment to somebody who needs 3 of them in the Baltic country. I think now there's only 2 that they're going to buy, 1 for each of the Baltic countries, with the kind of equipment they have on there and the kind of troops that they have massed, not just on the eastern, on the western frontiers of Ukraine, their western frontiers and our eastern frontiers. There are huge masses of troops outside of Estonia, outside of Lithuania, outside of Latvia as well, not just Ukraine. Now, of course, they've concentrated them there. They could march in any time in terms of their war material that they have. Now, mind you, if Mr. Zhirinovsky and other people of his mind, whom Mr. Putin himself says they're crazy, but you see, they speak on his censored state television quite regularly. So obviously they're sending a message. In a brutal way, if you like, but a message that has been getting through to the Western powers, who are getting very scared, you see. And I think that is the intent. This marvelous sense of guilt and self-flagellation, I have never seen it in history from anybody, frankly, including the European powers. And I wonder where these ideas come from. I have a good idea where they come from. I think, in fact, I have been able to trace some of the paths through which such ideas circulate. Imagine the extraordinary situation where, as I told you, countries recover their liberty. They make huge efforts. And I can tell you, in my country, there was a huge social cost. And so there was in Poland and the Czech Republic and Slovakia, and even you name it. There was a social cost to this enormous transition from imposed communism to freely chosen capitalism. Many people suffered, and today even our income has not reached in 20 years the level, say, of Austria and other prosperous countries who had, since the end of the Second World War, to go through that path of development. It took them all that time. And you see, it's our fault. I guess it's our fault we're alive, you know, God. They did try and kill, actually, a lot of us. They didn't manage to kill us all. I remember a chauffeur that I had during as a president who said at work he used to be called the fascist that we didn't get around to shooting. Because anybody who wasn't a Bolshevik was a fascist by definition. We hear that the same thing now in Ukraine. Anybody who wants independence is a fascist. Everybody else is somebody else. And in Europe, of course, I think I could see the guilt in Germany for starting the war and all the horrors that they committed. But why everybody else should feel guilty? And I remember having discussions with President Chirac, with whom we had excellent relations, but who just simply loved Mr. Putin and who loved Russia from his youth. And he kept telling me that we should not sort of pull the whiskers of the bear. And I said, and you are treating Russia as a hypochondriac. The Molière play, you know, the malade imaginaire. The rich uncle who is a hypochondriac and who everybody has to walk on tiptoe and they constantly have to look after him because he has an ache here and an unease here and he needs medicine and he needs care. Russia is acting like a hypochondriac and everybody is running and tiptoeing around them and scraping and bowing as if they were the rich uncle from whom they were expecting an inheritance, but they are not. And I keep wondering where this attitude comes from. Is it then just the nuclear wars that were taken away from Ukraine? The Ukrainians must be bitterly regretting taking that step, because then they could say, okay, you want to nuke us, we'll nuke you, and we'll all go to Kingdom Come and go up in smoke. It's not a Cold War anymore. Heavens, since they marched with tanks into Georgia, it's not a Cold War. Everybody's worried about the Cold War. I'm worried about hot war. I will forever feel actually embarrassed about a piece I wrote for a publication during the French presidency, the first part of 1988, about security in Europe. And I had this very I don't know, naive phrase, I must say, in looking in hindsight, you know, saying, well, we have had, since the collapse of the Soviet Union, a new order in the world. We can hopefully now in Europe, finally, after all these, especially the preceding century and its bloodshed, we can look forward to a time when no country has to worry about foreign tanks rolling across the border. And the thing was barely printed that tanks were rolling through the tunnel. Well, they actually had been in the tunnel and through the tunnel before the Georgians woke up to it. That's another story. But the fact is there was an invasion of territory. They were, I think, 47 kilometers away from Tbilisi, which is a capital, which had signed a treaty of non-aggression and a treaty of mutual respect of sovereignty. So 2008 was a warning shot. Crimea was a new kind of war. We remember in 2014, what happened 100 and 200 years ago. I'd say, yes, 2014 will go into history with a new kind of war. These little green men who come in and who take over a country and annex it to another. And the annexing country claims, oh, we never did a thing. We never lifted a thing. It just happened, you know, by the grace of God or in a mysterious way. And everybody says, yes, well, I guess that's the way it is. Presumably they had the right to it. If we continue that way, ladies and gentlemen, we are in deep trouble in the whole world.